In September 1983, 5-year-old Noah Turner vanished from his quiet hometown of Greenfield, Indiana. It was a morning like any other, sunrise over cornfields, children heading to school, a mother packing lunch in a modest family home. Then, without warning, Noah disappeared. No witnesses came forward. No evidence was found. And decades later, the case remains unsolved. This is the haunting story of an ordinary morning that ended in silence, and a mystery that still refuses to fade. On a quiet Tuesday morning in September 1983, a 5-year-old boy named Noah Turner sat at his kitchen table, eating Cheerios and swinging his legs beneath his chair. By noon, he would vanish without a trace. No body. No witnesses. No answers. What happened in those few hours would haunt a small Indiana town for decades to come, and the truth, if it exists at all, remains buried somewhere in the silence between what people saw and what they refused to remember. Before we dive into this case, I need you to do something for me. If you're someone who believes that every missing child deserves to have their story told, that every cold case deserves another look, that justice doesn't have an expiration date, then hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on your notifications. And drop a comment below telling me which cold case we should investigate next. Your engagement keeps these stories alive. It keeps the pressure on. It reminds the world that we haven't forgotten. So subscribe to the Cold Case Desk, give this video a like, and let's get into the disappearance of Noah Turner. The town of Greenfield, Indiana, in 1983 was the kind of place where people didn't lock their doors. Where children rode their bikes until the streetlights came on. Where everyone knew everyone, and secrets, if there were any, were small, harmless things. Gossip about who was dating whom. Speculation about which neighbor might be having money troubles. Nothing dark. Nothing sinister. Nothing that could prepare a community for what was about to unfold. Greenfield sits about 25 miles east of Indianapolis, a town of roughly 11,000 people back then, surrounded by endless stretches of farmland that turned gold in the autumn light. The downtown area consisted of a handful of local businesses, a hardware store, a diner called Millie's that served the best pie in 3 counties, a barbershop where old men gathered to talk politics and weather, and a single movie theater that showed films 3 months after they'd premiered in the cities. It was the kind of place people moved to when they wanted to raise their children somewhere safe. Somewhere wholesome. Somewhere far removed from the dangers of urban life. The Turner family embodied everything that made Greenfield feel. Linda Turner, 32, was Robert's opposite in many ways. Where he was reserved, she was warm. Where he was serious, she was quick to laugh. She had grown up in Greenfield, the daughter of a factory worker and a school secretary, and she knew nearly everyone in town by name. She volunteered at the elementary school library twice a week, organizing book fairs and reading to kindergartners with animated voices that made the children shriek with delight. She baked cookies for church functions and always remembered neighbors' birthdays. Her house on Maple Street was always welcoming, always smelling of something homemade, always filled with the small touches that made a house feel like a home: fresh flowers on the dining table, photographs covering the refrigerator, children's drawings taped to the walls. And then there was Noah. 5 years old. Sandy blonde hair that stuck up in the back no matter how much Linda tried to smooth it down. Bright blue eyes that seemed almost too big for his small face. A gap between his 2 front teeth that made his smile slightly crooked but utterly endearing. He was a quiet child, more likely to be found sitting in the corner with a pile of toy cars than running wild with the neighborhood kids. He had a peculiar habit of lining things up: his toy soldiers, his crayons, his books. Everything had to be in perfect rows, evenly spaced, organized by some system only he understood. Linda had mentioned it to the pediatrician once, wondering if it was something to be concerned about, but the doctor had waved it off as a phase, something he'd grow out of. Noah loved dinosaurs with the single-minded intensity that only a 5-year-old can muster. He could name every species in his picture books: Tyrannosaurus rex, Triceratops, Stegosaurus, Brachiosaurus. He pronounced them carefully, his small tongue working around the syllables with serious concentration. He had a stuffed green dinosaur named Rex that went everywhere with him, its fabric worn soft from constant handling, one eye hanging by a thread that Linda kept promising to sew back on properly. On that Tuesday morning in September, the morning that would become the last normal morning the Turner family would ever know, everything followed its usual routine with almost painful orderity. Robert woke at 6:15, showered, dressed in one of his 3 nearly identical gray suits, and came downstairs to find Linda already in the kitchen. The coffee was brewing, filling the house with its rich, bitter smell. Toast sat in the toaster, waiting to be pushed down. The radio played softly on the counter, the morning DJ's cheerful voice announcing that it would be a beautiful day, temperatures in the mid-70s, clear skies, perfect weather for the high school football game that Friday night. Linda wore jeans and a yellow sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She hummed while she moved around the kitchen, that unconscious habit she had, humming fragments of songs she'd heard on the radio or hymns from church. That morning it was Amazing Grace, the melody floating through the kitchen like a prayer she didn't know she was offering. Noah came downstairs around 7, padding into the kitchen in his pajamas, carrying Rex under one arm. His hair was mussed from sleep, standing up at odd angles. He climbed into his chair at the kitchen table, the chair with the booster seat that made him just tall enough to reach his bowl comfortably. His legs dangled, feet swinging back and forth in that restless way children have, never quite still even when sitting down. Linda poured Cheerios into his bowl, added milk, and set it in front of him with a spoon. Noah immediately began pushing the cereal around, creating patterns, organizing the little OS into groups. He did this every morning, this small ritual that turned breakfast into a game only he understood. Sometimes he made circles. Sometimes he spelled out letters. That morning, according to Linda's later testimony, he was making a face, 2 Cheerios for eyes, a curved line of cereal for a smile. "Eat, sweetheart," Linda said, the same thing she said every morning. "Don't just play with it." Noah nodded but continued arranging the cereal for another moment before finally taking a bite. Robert sat across from him, reading the newspaper, folding it into neat quarters the way he always did, reading each section methodically before moving to the next. The business section first. Then local news. Sports last. He drank his coffee black, no sugar, taking small, measured sips. The 3 of them sat there in the morning light filtering through the kitchen curtains, yellow gingham curtains that Linda had made herself, and if you could have frozen that moment, captured it somehow, you would have seen nothing unusual. Nothing concerning. Nothing that would suggest that in a few short hours, this family would be torn apart in a way they would never recover from. Robert left for work at 7:45, kissing Linda on the cheek and ruffling Noah's hair as he passed. "Be good for your mom," he said, the same thing he said every morning. "I will," Noah replied, his mouth full of cereal. Linda watched Robert's car pull out of the driveway, the familiar sound of the engine fading as he drove down Maple Street toward the highway that would take him to Indianapolis. She turned back to the kitchen where Noah was still eating, slowly now, his attention drifting to the window where a bird had landed on the feeder outside. "We need to get you dressed," Linda said, checking the clock on the wall. 8 o'clock. Kindergarten started at 8:30, and the school was a 10-minute walk from their house. Noah nodded, sliding down from his chair, leaving his bowl still half full of soggy Cheerios floating in milk. He went upstairs to his room, and Linda followed, helping him change into his clothes for the day. The red-striped shirt, his favorite, even though it had that small hole in the left sleeve. She'd been meaning to mend it for weeks, but there was always something else that needed doing, and it was just a small hole, barely noticeable, and Noah loved that shirt so much that he asked to wear it at least twice a week. Blue jeans, slightly too long, the hems dragging on the floor until Linda rolled them up in neat cuffs. White socks. His scuffed sneakers with the laces that she tied for him because he hadn't quite mastered the skill yet, though he insisted on trying first, his small fingers fumbling with the loops, his tongue poking out slightly in concentration. Linda brushed his hair, trying to smooth down that persistent cowlick in the back, but it sprang back up the moment she removed the brush. She kissed the top of his head, breathing in that particular smell of childhood, shampoo and sleep and something indefinably sweet. "Go brush your teeth," she said, and Noah went into the bathroom while Linda went back downstairs to pack his lunch. This was another ritual, repeated so many times it had become automatic. She made the same lunch nearly every day because Noah was particular about food, resistant to change, upset by surprises in his lunchbox. A peanut butter and jelly sandwich on white bread, cut diagonally because he refused to eat it if it was cut straight across. An apple, sliced, because he wouldn't eat a whole apple. A small bag of pretzels. A juice box, always grape, never apple or fruit punch. A napkin. A plastic spoon even though he didn't need one, but he liked having it, liked the weight of it in his lunchbox. She packed it all into his red lunchbox with the cartoon dinosaurs on the side, the lunchbox he'd picked out himself at the start of the school year just 2 weeks earlier. She added a small note, the way she did sometimes, little messages on folded paper, "Have a great day. Love, Mom," with a smiley face drawn in the corner. Noah came back downstairs, his teeth brushed, his breath minty. Linda handed him his backpack, helped him shrug it on. It was almost comically large on his small frame, making him look even tinier than he was. "Ready?" she asked. He nodded, picking up Rex from where he'd left the stuffed dinosaur on the couch. "You can't bring Rex to school, remember? He has to stay home." Noah's face fell, that quick shift from contentment to disappointment that children experience so intensely. "But he'll be lonely. He'll be fine. He can wait for you on your bed. You'll see him as soon as you get home." Noah considered this, then carefully placed Rex on the couch, positioning him just so, making sure he was comfortable. "I'll be back soon," he whispered to the stuffed animal. Linda's heart ached in that small, sweet way it often did when she watched her son, those moments of tenderness that pierced through the ordinary routine of daily life. She didn't know, couldn't know, that she would remember this moment with Rex 1,000 times over the coming years, that she would replay it endlessly in her mind, that she would wish desperately that she had let him take the dinosaur to school, that she would have given anything to go back and change that small decision. They left the house at 8:15. Linda locked the door behind them, something she'd only recently started doing after reading a news story about burglaries in Indianapolis. Greenfield felt safe, but it didn't hurt to be careful. She dropped the keys into her purse, took Noah's hand, and they began walking toward Greenfield Elementary School. It was a beautiful morning. The kind of morning that made you grateful to be alive. The sun was warm but not hot, the air crisp but not cold. The leaves on the trees were just beginning to turn, hints of gold and red among the green. The street was quiet, most people already at work or school, only a few cars passing by, drivers waving to Linda as they went past. They walked down Maple Street, past the Henderson house with its overgrown lawn and the rusty pickup truck in the driveway. Past the Morrison house where Mrs. Morrison was already outside watering her roses, waving to Linda and Noah as they passed. Past the empty lot on the corner where kids sometimes played baseball, the grass worn down in patches from running feet. They turned onto Elm Street, then onto Oak Street. The school was visible now, a single-story brick building with a playground out front, swings and slides and a merry-go-round that had been there since Linda herself was a child. A few other parents were walking their children to school, and Linda waved to the ones she knew, exchanging quick greetings. "Morning, Linda. Beautiful day, isn't it? Sarah's so excited about the field trip next week." Small talk. The comfortable rhythm of community, of knowing your neighbors, of lives lived in parallel, intersecting at school functions and grocery stores and church on Sundays. They reached the school at 8:25. The bell hadn't rung yet, so children were still arriving, streaming in from different directions, their voices high and excited, comparing lunchboxes and trading stickers and arguing over who got to be leader when they played tag at recess. Linda walked Noah to his classroom, room 7, Mrs. Patterson's kindergarten class. The door was open, and inside Linda could see the bright, cheerful chaos of an elementary classroom, alphabet posters on the walls, a reading corner with bean bags and books, tables set up with crayons and paper for the morning's art project. Mrs. Patterson stood at the door, greeting each child as they arrived. She was in her 50s, a veteran teacher with gray hair and kind eyes and the particular sort of patience that comes from spending decades with 5-year-olds. She smiled when she saw Noah. "Good morning, Noah. Are you ready for a fun day?" Noah nodded, still holding Linda's hand. Linda knelt down to his level, straightening his collar, brushing that stubborn piece of hair off his forehead one more time. "You have a good day, okay? I'll pick you up right at 3. "Okay," Noah said quietly. "I love you. I love you too." She kissed his forehead, breathing in that sweet child smell one more time, and then Noah walked into the classroom, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders, his sneakers squeaking slightly on the linoleum floor. Linda watched him go, watched him put his backpack in his cubby, watched him sit down at one of the tables where other children were already coloring. He picked up a blue crayon and began to draw, and Linda felt that familiar tug of emotion, that mixture of love and pride and the bittersweet awareness that he was growing up, becoming more independent, needing her a little less each day. Mrs. Patterson touched Linda's arm gently. "He'll be fine. We're going to have a great day." Linda nodded, smiled, and turned to leave. She walked back down the hallway, past the classrooms full of children, past the principal's office, past the display case with trophies and photographs. She pushed through the front doors and stepped back out into the September sunshine. The walk home felt different without Noah beside her. Quieter. Her hand felt empty without his small fingers wrapped around hers. She thought about what she needed to do that day: laundry, a trip to the grocery store, maybe some gardening if she had time. Ordinary tasks. The mundane work of maintaining a household, a life, a family. She didn't know that she would never walk Noah to school again. She didn't know that in less than 7 hours, her entire world would collapse. She didn't know that the police would question whether she had really walked him all the way to the classroom, whether she had really seen him sit down and pick up that blue crayon, whether any of it had happened the way she said it did. She walked home, unlocked the door, stepped inside. Rex was still on the couch where Noah had left him, waiting patiently for a little boy who would never come home. The morning passed the way mornings do. Linda did laundry, sorting clothes into piles, loading the washing machine, measuring detergent. She vacuumed the living room, pushing the vacuum over the same spots she'd vacuumed 100 times before, the familiar hum of the motor, the satisfaction of seeing the carpet lines smooth and even. She made the beds, fluffing pillows, straightening blankets, tucking in corners with hospital corners the way her mother had taught her. Around 10:30, she made herself a cup of tea and sat down at the kitchen table with a novel she'd been reading, a romance about a woman who moves to a small coastal town and falls in love with a lighthouse keeper. She read for about an hour, losing herself in someone else's story, someone else's happiness. At noon, she made lunch for herself, a sandwich, an apple, a glass of water. She ate standing at the counter, looking out the window at the backyard where Noah's swing set sat empty, swaying slightly in the breeze. She thought about calling her mother, maybe driving over to visit, but decided against it. Her mother had been feeling poorly lately, complaining of headaches and fatigue, and Linda didn't want to disturb her if she was resting. Instead, she decided to do some gardening. The flower beds needed weeding, and fall was a good time to plant bulbs for spring. She changed into old jeans and a t-shirt, found her gardening gloves in the garage, grabbed her hand trowel and a bucket. She spent the next 2 hours in the front yard, kneeling in the dirt, pulling weeds, deadheading the late-season flowers, planning where she would plant the tulip bulbs she'd bought at the hardware store. The physical work felt good, the sun warm on her back, her hands busy with simple, concrete tasks. Neighbors passed by occasionally, and she'd wave, exchange a few words. "Garden looks beautiful, Linda." "Thank you. I'm trying to get the last of the weeds before winter." "You putting in bulbs?" "Tulips. I'm hoping for a nice show in the spring." Normal conversation. The comfortable back and forth of neighbors who've known each other for years. No one seemed worried. No one seemed concerned. The day unfolded with peaceful, unremarkable normalcy. At 2:30, Linda went inside to clean up. She washed her hands, scrubbing the dirt from under her fingernails, changed back into clean clothes. She grabbed her purse, checked to make sure she had her keys, and left the house to walk to the school. Pickup time was 3 o'clock, and parents were expected to be prompt. Linda was always early, always one of the first parents there, waiting by the classroom door when Mrs. Patterson released the children. She arrived at the school at 2:45. A few other parents were already there, standing in the hallway outside room 7, chatting while they waited. Linda joined them, exchanging smiles and small talk. "How was your day?" "Good. Got some gardening done." "Wasn't the weather just perfect?" "Absolutely beautiful." At 3 o'clock, the bell rang, a loud electronic buzz that echoed through the hallways. Almost immediately, classroom doors began opening and children poured out, a cacophony of voices and movement and energy that had been bottled up all day. Mrs. Patterson opened the door to room 7, and children began streaming out, running to their parents, holding up artwork, talking over each other in their excitement to share every detail of their day. Linda waited, watching for Noah's sandy blonde hair, his red-striped shirt. Children kept coming out, one after another, and Linda smiled at them, but her eyes were scanning, searching. The flow of children slowed, then stopped. The hallway began to clear as parents and children left. Linda's smile faltered slightly. She stepped closer to the doorway, looking into the classroom. Mrs. Patterson was inside, cleaning up, putting crayons back in boxes, straightening tables. Linda's heart began to beat a little faster, though she couldn't have said why. "Excuse me, Mrs. Patterson?" The teacher looked up, smiled. "Yes, Linda? Is Noah still in there?" Mrs. Patterson's smile faded slightly, replaced by a look of confusion. "Noah?" "Yes, my son. Noah Turner. Is he in the bathroom or?" Mrs. Patterson's expression shifted, confusion deepening into something that made Linda's stomach clench. "Linda, Noah wasn't in school today." The hallway seemed to tilt slightly. Linda's hand reached out, steadying herself against the doorframe. "What?" "No, I dropped him off this morning. I walked him right to this classroom. I saw him sit down. You were here, you greeted him at the door." Mrs. Patterson stepped closer, her face now showing concern, alarm even. "Linda, I promise you, Noah wasn't here today. I marked him absent on the attendance sheet this morning." "That's impossible. I walked him here. I watched him go to his cubby. I watched him sit down and pick up a blue crayon. He was here." "Linda, I'm telling you, he wasn't. Let me show you the attendance sheet." Mrs. Patterson went to her desk, picked up a clipboard, brought it over. She pointed to Noah's name on the list. Next to it, clearly marked in her handwriting, was an A for absent. Linda stared at it, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. There must be a mistake. Maybe you marked the wrong name. Maybe. There's no mistake. I remember wondering where he was. I thought maybe he was sick. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly following this shocking story. The next few minutes dissolved into a blur of panic and confusion. Linda's voice rose, insisting that she had walked Noah to school, that she had seen him with her own eyes. Mrs. Patterson remained calm but firm. Noah had not been in her classroom that day. Other teachers came out of their rooms, drawn by the commotion. The principal, Mr. Davidson, a tall man in his 60s with thinning hair and wire-rimmed glasses, appeared in the hallway. "What's going on here?" Mrs. Patterson explained quickly, her voice low and urgent. Mr. Davidson's face went pale. He looked at Linda, who was now trembling, her purse clutched against her chest like a shield. "Mrs. Turner, let's go to my office and we'll sort this out." "There's nothing to sort out." Linda's voice was shrill now, edged with hysteria. "My son is missing. Someone needs to find my son. Let's just stay calm." "Don't tell me to stay calm. Noah is missing." Mr. Davidson raised his hands, a placating gesture. "We're going to find him. But first, I need you to tell me everything. Come to my office. Mrs. Patterson, check all the classrooms, the bathrooms, the playground. Check everywhere." Teachers scattered, beginning to search the building. Linda followed Mr. Davidson to his office on legs that didn't feel quite solid, her mind racing through possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. In the office, Mr. Davidson sat her down in a chair across from his desk and handed her a glass of water. She didn't drink it, just held it, staring at the liquid, trembling with the shaking of her hands. "Tell me exactly what happened this morning." Linda's voice came out strangled, broken. "I walked him to school. We left the house at 8:15. We walked down Maple, turned onto Elm, then Oak. We got here at 8:25. I walked him to the classroom. Mrs. Patterson was at the door. Noah went inside, put his backpack in his cubby, sat down at a table. I watched him pick up a blue crayon. I left. I walked home." Mr. Davidson wrote this down, his pen scratching across paper. "And you're absolutely certain it was today?" "Of course I'm certain. It was this morning." "And Mrs. Patterson greeted you both?" Linda paused, thinking back, trying to pull up the exact memory. Had Mrs. Patterson greeted them specifically? She'd been at the door, greeting children. Had she said Noah's name? Linda couldn't remember. The morning had been so ordinary, so routine, that the details blurred together with every other morning. "She was at the door," Linda said slowly. "She greets all the children. But did she specifically greet Noah?" I think so. I don't know." Linda made a sound, something between a sob and a gasp. The room spun slightly, and she gripped the arms of the chair, trying to anchor herself. Mr. Davidson hung up the phone. "The police are on their way. Mrs. Turner, is there anyone we can call for you?" "Your husband? A family member?" "Robert. My husband. He's at work in Indianapolis." "What's the number?" Linda recited it automatically, numbers she'd dialed 1,000 times, and Mr. Davidson called Robert's office. She could hear him explaining the situation, his voice carefully neutral, professional, and then Robert's voice on the other end, rising in volume, shock and fear bleeding through the phone line. "He's leaving now," Mr. Davidson said, hanging up. "He'll be here as soon as he can." The next hour passed in fragments, moments that Linda would later struggle to piece together into a coherent narrative. The police arrived, 2 officers in dark blue uniforms, their faces serious but not yet alarmed. They asked questions, the same questions Mr. Davidson had asked, and Linda answered them the same way, her story unchanging because it was the truth, because this was what had happened, even though no one seemed to believe her. "You're certain you walked him all the way to the classroom?" "Yes." "You saw him go inside?" "Yes." "You saw him sit down?" "Yes, I watched him sit down and pick up a blue crayon." "And what time did you leave?" "About 8:25, maybe 8:30. "And you walked straight home?" "Yes." "Did you see anyone on the way? Anyone unusual?" Linda tried to think. Had she seen anyone? Mrs. Morrison watering her roses. A few cars passing by. Other parents walking their children to school. No one unusual. No one suspicious. Just an ordinary Tuesday morning in Greenfield. No one unusual, she said. Just neighbors. And when you got home, what did you do? Laundry. Cleaning. I read for a bit. I had lunch. I did some gardening. Was anyone with you? No, I was alone. Did you talk to anyone? On the phone, or in person? A few neighbors when I was gardening. Just casual conversation. Do you remember their names? Linda struggled to focus. Mrs. Henderson. Mr. Collins. I think Mrs. Morrison came over for a few minutes. The officers wrote everything down. One of them excused himself and went outside to use his radio. Linda could see him through the office window, speaking into his radio, calling for backup, for more officers, for people to help search. Robert arrived at 4:30, bursting into the office, his face ashen, his suit jacket askew. He went straight to Linda, kneeling in front of her chair, taking her hands in his. What happened? Where's Noah? Linda couldn't speak, could only shake her head, tears finally spilling over, running down her face. One of the officers explained the situation to Robert, and Linda watched her husband's face go through the same progression of emotions she had experienced: confusion, disbelief, fear, then raw panic. You have to find him, Robert said, his voice breaking. You have to find our son. We're doing everything we can, Mr. Turner. We have officers searching the area around the school and your neighborhood. We've issued an alert to all nearby jurisdictions. If Noah is out there, we will find him. If. That terrible word hung in the air like a threat. If he's out there. Implying that he might not be. Implying possibilities that neither Linda nor Robert could bear to consider. The police escorted the Turners home, following them in their patrol car, watching as Linda unlocked the door with shaking hands and they all stepped inside. The house looked exactly as Linda had left it. Rex still on the couch. Noah's breakfast bowl still in the sink. His shoes by the door. His bedroom door open, his bed neatly made, his toys organized in their specific way. The police searched the house, opening closets, checking under beds, looking in places a 5-year-old boy couldn't possibly be. They found nothing. Noah wasn't there. Noah hadn't been there. One of the officers, a woman in her 30s with short dark hair and sympathetic eyes, sat down with Linda and Robert at the kitchen table. Her name was Officer Martinez, and she spoke gently, carefully, but her questions cut deep. I know this is difficult, but I need to ask, is there any possibility Noah ran away? Had he been upset about anything? School? Home? Linda shook her head vehemently. No, he loved school. He was happy. Any family conflicts? Arguments? No, nothing like that. We're a normal family. Everything was fine. Is there anyone who might have wanted to take Noah? Anyone who'd been showing unusual interest in him? The question made Linda's skin crawl. No. God, no. Who would do something like that? Officer Martinez's expression remained neutral, professional. We have to consider all possibilities. What about custody issues? Extended family who might have disagreed with your parenting? No. Robert's parents are deceased. My parents live here in Greenfield. Everyone loves Noah. No one would take him. What about friends? Did Noah have any friends he might have gone with? He's 5 years old. He doesn't go anywhere without permission. The questions continued, circling the same territory, probing for explanations that didn't exist. Robert sat beside Linda, holding her hand, his grip so tight it hurt, but she didn't pull away. They needed to hold on to each other, needed something solid and real in a situation that had become impossibly surreal. By evening, the search had expanded dramatically. More police officers arrived, along with volunteers from the community. The story had spread through Greenfield with stunning speed, passed along through phone calls and conversations at the grocery store and whispered exchanges in front yards. A 5-year-old boy had vanished somewhere between his home and his school, disappeared in broad daylight in a safe town where nothing bad ever happened. People gathered at the school, organizing themselves into search parties. They spread out across Greenfield, walking through yards and parks, checking empty buildings and wooded areas, calling Noah's name into the growing darkness. Flashlights bobbed like fireflies as the sun set, dozens of them, hundreds eventually, the entire town mobilized to find one small boy. The Turner's house became a command center of sorts. Police officers came and went, using the kitchen table to coordinate search efforts, spreading maps across the surface where Noah had eaten breakfast just that morning. The phone rang constantly, neighbors calling to offer help, family calling from out of town, reporters calling for information. Linda couldn't eat, couldn't sit still. She moved through her house like a ghost, touching Noah's things, picking up his stuffed dinosaur and holding it against her chest, going into his room and sitting on his bed, breathing in his scent from his pillow. Robert tried to hold her, to comfort her, but she shook him off. She couldn't be comforted. Comfort implied acceptance, and she couldn't accept this. Wouldn't accept this. Around 9 that evening, a detective arrived. His name was Detective William Graves, a man in his late 40s with graying hair and a weathered face that suggested he'd seen too much of humanity's darkness. He introduced himself to Linda and Robert, his voice gravelly but not unkind, and he sat with them in their living room and asked questions they'd already answered a dozen times. But Detective Graves asked different questions too. Deeper questions. More personal questions. Tell me about your marriage. How are things between you two? Robert bristled. What does that have to do with finding Noah? I need to understand the full picture. Please, just answer the question. We're fine, Linda said quietly. We're happy. We don't fight. We're just normal. Any financial troubles? No. Robert has a good job. We live within our means. Any substance abuse? Drinking? Drugs? No. Neither of us. Mental health issues? Depression? Anxiety? Linda hesitated, and Detective Graves noticed immediately, leaning forward slightly. Mrs. Turner? I've been a little stressed lately, Linda admitted. Just normal parenting stress. Noah can be particular about things. Routines. Order. Sometimes it's exhausting. But that's normal, isn't it? That's just being a mother. Have you seen anyone about this stress? A doctor? A therapist? No. I didn't think it was that serious. Detective Graves made a note. Linda felt a flutter of fear in her chest. Were they starting to suspect her? Did they think she had done something to her own child? The night wore on. Search parties came back empty-handed, exhausted and disappointed. The initial hope that Noah had simply wandered off and would be found quickly began to fade, replaced by a growing dread that this was something worse, something darker. The police set up roadblocks on the highways leaving Greenfield, stopping cars, checking trunks. They interviewed neighbors, asking if anyone had seen anything unusual that morning. They reviewed the routes Linda said she'd walked, looking for witnesses who could confirm her story. And that was the problem, the detail that would haunt this case for decades: no one could confirm Linda's story. Yes, neighbors had seen her leave her house with Noah around 8:15. Mrs. Morrison had seen them walking past her house. But after that? Nothing. No one had seen them at the school. No one had seen Noah at all after approximately 8:20 that morning. Mrs. Patterson was adamant, Noah had not been in her classroom. She had not greeted him at the door. She had marked him absent. Several other parents who'd been dropping off their children at the same time confirmed they hadn't seen Noah in the hallway or the classroom. Which left two possibilities, both terrible in their own way: either someone had taken Noah during that 10-minute walk to school, snatching him so quickly and quietly that Linda hadn't noticed, or Linda was lying about what had happened that morning. The police couldn't say this directly, not yet, but Linda could feel it in their questions, in the way they kept circling back to her story, asking her to repeat it, looking for inconsistencies, for cracks in her narrative. "Walk me through it one more time, Mrs. Turner. You left your house at 8:15. Yes. Holding Noah's hand? Yes. And you walked down Maple Street? Yes. Past the Henderson house? Yes. Past the Morrison house? Yes. Mrs. Morrison saw you. She waved. You waved back? Yes. And then? We turned onto Elm Street. Did you see anyone on Elm Street? I don't remember. Maybe. I don't know. It was just a normal walk. And then you turned onto Oak Street? Yes. And you could see the school? Yes. And you walked to the school? Yes. And you went inside? Here Linda paused. She'd been so certain earlier, but now, under the relentless questioning, the memory felt slippery, unreliable. Had she gone inside? She must have. She remembered walking Noah to the classroom. But the more she tried to grasp the specific memory, the more it seemed to shift and change. Yes, she said, but her voice sounded uncertain even to her own ears. You went inside the building? I think so. I always walk him to the classroom. But today, specifically, you went inside? I must have. I remember seeing him sit down. But you don't specifically remember walking through the door? Through the hallway? Linda pressed her hands to her temples, trying to force her brain to cooperate, to produce the memories she knew must be there. It all runs together. I've walked him to school every day since school started. The routine is always the same. But today, Mrs. Turner. I need to know about today specifically. I don't know, Linda whispered. I don't know if I specifically remember today or if I'm remembering all the other days. But I wouldn't have left him outside. I wouldn't have just let him walk in alone. He's 5 years old. Detective Graves exchanged a look with Officer Martinez. Linda saw it and felt her stomach drop. What? What is it? Mrs. Turner, is it possible that you intended to walk Noah all the way to his classroom, but you were distracted, or you assumed he would be fine, and you actually left him outside the school? On the playground maybe, or by the front door? No. No, I wouldn't do that. But is it possible? If you were tired, or stressed, or thinking about something else? No. I walked him to his classroom. I saw him sit down. I saw him pick up a blue crayon. But even as she said it, Linda felt doubt creeping in, insidious and terrifying. Had she seen him pick up a blue crayon? Or was that from a different day? Her memory of this morning was suddenly unreliable, fragmenting under pressure, mixing with memories of other mornings, other walks to school, other moments of watching Noah settle into his classroom routine. Robert put his arm around her shoulders. Stop badgering her. She's told you what happened. Why aren't you out there looking for Noah instead of interrogating his mother? Detective Graves' expression remained neutral. We are looking, Mr. Turner. We have dozens of officers and hundreds of volunteers searching every inch of this town. But we need to understand exactly what happened this morning if we're going to find your son. The interrogation continued for another hour, the same questions asked in different ways, probing for inconsistencies, for admissions, for anything that might explain how a 5-year-old boy could vanish without a trace. Finally, around midnight, Detective Graves stood up, signaling that he was done for now. We'll continue the search at first light. In the meantime, I need you both to stay in town, stay available for more questions. And if you remember anything at all, you call me immediately." He handed Robert a business card, and then he left, taking most of the other officers with him. The house fell quiet, emptier than it had ever felt. Linda and Robert sat in the living room, the television on but muted, showing news coverage of the search, images of flashlights in the darkness, reporters standing outside their house, speaking into cameras with serious expressions. Robert turned off the television. "He's going to be okay. They'll find him tomorrow. Someone probably found him and took him home, and they just haven't called yet. Or he's hiding somewhere, playing a game. He'll turn up." Linda didn't answer. She knew Robert was trying to comfort her, trying to comfort himself, but the explanations felt hollow. Noah wouldn't wander off. Noah didn't talk to strangers. Noah followed rules. Something terrible had happened, and no amount of wishful thinking would change that. They didn't sleep that night. They sat on the couch, holding each other, watching the clock on the wall count down the hours, each minute that passed making it less likely that Noah would be found safe and unharmed. The next morning, Wednesday, the search resumed with renewed intensity. By mid-morning, the story had spread beyond Greenfield. News vans from Indianapolis arrived, parking in front of the Turner house, reporters setting up cameras and trying to get statements from anyone who would talk to them. The police held a press conference at 10 o'clock, with Linda and Robert standing behind the podium looking shell-shocked and exhausted. Detective Graves described Noah, gave the details of when he'd last been seen, asked anyone with information to come forward. Linda made a tearful plea, her voice breaking as she spoke directly to whoever might have taken her son. "Please, if you have Noah, please bring him home. He's just a little boy. He needs his family. He needs his mother. Please, please don't hurt him. Just let him go. We won't press charges, we won't ask questions, just please bring him back to us." The image of Linda Turner, tears streaming down her face, begging for her son's return, would be broadcast across the state, then across the country. It would become one of those iconic images of parental grief that people remember years later, a symbol of every parent's worst nightmare. But not everyone who saw it felt sympathy. Some people, watching at home, saw something different in Linda's tears. Something performative. Something false. They would call the police, saying they didn't believe her, saying she seemed guilty, saying a real mother would be more frantic, more desperate, or less frantic, less desperate, depending on what they thought a grieving mother should look like. The investigation began to split into two paths. One group of detectives continued to pursue the theory that Noah had been abducted, either by a stranger or by someone known to the family. They interviewed registered sex offenders in the area, checked alibis, looked for suspicious vehicles that might have been in Greenfield that morning. They found nothing. No credible suspects. No physical evidence. No witnesses. The other group began to focus more intensely on Linda and Robert themselves. This was statistically sound. In cases of missing children, the parents are often involved. Sometimes it's accidental, a punishment gone too far, a moment of anger with tragic consequences, panic leading to cover-up. Sometimes it's deliberate, mental illness, marital problems, financial desperation. They dug into the Turners' lives, looking for cracks in the facade of normalcy. They interviewed Robert's co-workers, asking about his marriage, his finances, his behavior. They interviewed Linda's friends, asking about her mental state, her relationship with Noah, whether she'd ever seemed overwhelmed by motherhood. They interviewed Linda's doctor, getting her medical records. They found that she'd been prescribed antidepressants 2 years earlier, after Noah's birth, for postpartum depression. She'd only taken them for a few months before stopping. Was it relevant? Maybe. Maybe not. But it added to a picture they were building, a stressed mother, possibly struggling with mental health issues, alone with her child. They searched the Turner house thoroughly, looking for signs of violence, for blood evidence, for anything that might indicate Noah had been harmed there. They found nothing. The house was clean, well-maintained, full of the ordinary detritus of family life. Noah's room was neat, his toys organized, his bed made. There were no signs of struggle, no signs that anything violent had occurred. They searched the yard, the garage, the neighborhood. They brought in cadaver dogs, watching as the animals sniffed through yards and parks and empty lots. The dogs didn't alert to anything. If Noah had died, if his body was hidden somewhere in Greenfield, the dogs couldn't find it. Days passed, then a week. The massive search efforts began to slow as volunteers grew tired and resources were exhausted. The news coverage diminished, moving on to other stories, other tragedies. The Turners' phone stopped ringing constantly. The reporters left. The town began, slowly, to return to normal life, though normal would never truly be normal again. Linda stopped eating almost entirely, her weight dropping alarmingly. Robert took a leave of absence from work, unable to concentrate, unable to care about balance sheets and tax forms when his son was missing. They existed in a kind of limbo, not quite living, not quite grieving, waiting for news that never came. Detective Graves visited regularly, always with more questions, always probing, always watching their reactions. He was particularly interested in Linda's movements that morning, the hours between dropping Noah off, or not dropping him off, and picking him up. "You said you did laundry that morning." "Yes." "What did you wash?" "Just regular laundry." "Noah's clothes." "Our clothes." "Towels." "Do you still have that laundry?" I don't know. I folded it and put it away." "Why?" "We'd like to examine it." They took the clothes from Noah's drawers, bagged them as evidence, looking for blood or other signs that something had happened to him in his own home. They found nothing. "You said you did some gardening in the afternoon." "Yes." "Where specifically?" "The front flower beds." "Did you dig any new holes?" The question hit Linda like a slap. They thought she'd buried him. They thought she'd killed her own son and buried him in her front yard and then calmly gone to pick him up from school as if nothing had happened. "No," she whispered. "I was weeding. Deadheading flowers. I didn't dig anything new." But they searched the flower beds anyway, carefully sifting through the soil, looking for disturbances, for evidence that the ground had been recently moved. They found nothing. 2 weeks after Noah's disappearance, Detective Graves asked Linda to take a polygraph test. "It's voluntary," he said. "But it would help us eliminate you as a suspect and focus our investigation elsewhere." Linda agreed immediately, desperately wanting to prove her innocence, to make them believe her. Robert wanted to refuse, wanted to call a lawyer, but Linda insisted. "I have nothing to hide. I didn't do anything to Noah. Let them test me." The polygraph took place at the police station, in a small windowless room that felt like it was closing in on Linda the moment she stepped inside. The examiner, a man named Davis with cold eyes and an officious manner, attached sensors to her fingers, a band around her chest, wires connecting her to a machine that would supposedly measure truth and lies by monitoring her physiological responses. He asked baseline questions first: her name, her age, her address. Then he moved to the relevant questions. "Did you harm Noah Turner?" "No." "Do you know where Noah Turner is?" "No." "Did you walk Noah Turner all the way to his classroom on Tuesday, September 6th? Linda hesitated, and the machine registered the pause, the uncertainty. I believe I did." "That's not a yes or no answer, Mrs. Turner." "Did you or didn't you?" "I thought I did. I remember doing it. But everyone says I didn't, so I don't know anymore." The examiner frowned, made notes. The test continued, but the damage was done. When the results came back, they were deemed inconclusive, which in the court of public opinion might as well have been an admission of guilt. The rumor mill in Greenfield went into overdrive. Linda Turner had failed a polygraph test. Linda Turner probably killed her son. Linda Turner was lying about what happened that morning. People who had known her for years began to look at her differently, crossing the street to avoid her, whispering when she walked past, pulling their own children closer as if she might be dangerous. The theory that began to circulate, the one that Detective Graves seemed increasingly convinced of, was this: Linda Turner, stressed and possibly suffering from depression, had snapped that Tuesday morning. Maybe Noah had misbehaved. Maybe he'd refused to get ready for school or had a tantrum about something. In a moment of anger or frustration, Linda had struck him, harder than she intended. Noah had fallen, hit his head, died instantly or soon after. Panicked, Linda had hidden his body somewhere. The details were unclear. The house had been thoroughly searched with nothing found, but maybe she'd put him in the car, driven somewhere, disposed of him. Then she'd returned home, done laundry and gardening to establish an alibi, and gone to the school at pickup time, pretending confusion when Noah wasn't there, initiating the search to cover her own guilt. It was a theory that made a certain kind of sense, the kind of tragic accident that happens more often than people want to believe. But it had one major problem: there was no evidence. No body. No blood. No witnesses. No physical proof that anything bad had happened in the Turner house that morning. Without evidence, the police couldn't charge her. But without being able to charge her, they also couldn't really pursue other leads with full conviction. The investigation stalled, caught between suspicion of the mother and the lack of any proof to support that suspicion. Months passed. Fall turned to winter. Snow covered Greenfield, blanketing the town in white, covering the places where search parties had trampled the ground looking for Noah. Christmas came, unbearable in its normalcy, with decorations and carols that felt like mockery. The Turners' house remained dark, no lights, no tree, no celebration. Linda descended into a depression so profound that Robert finally insisted she see a doctor. She was prescribed medication, stronger than what she'd taken after Noah's birth, and it helped numb the edges of her grief but did nothing to fill the hole where her son had been. Robert threw himself into his own investigation, refusing to believe that Linda had been involved, refusing to accept that Noah was dead. He made flyers with Noah's picture, distributing them across Indiana and neighboring states. He called police departments in other cities, asking if any unidentified children had been found. He hired a private investigator, a man who took Robert's money and produced nothing of value. The private investigator's theory was that Noah had been abducted by someone passing through town, a drifter or a traveler, someone with no connection to Greenfield who had seen an opportunity and taken it. This person would have grabbed Noah somewhere during that walk to school, perhaps when Linda was distracted, perhaps during a brief moment when Noah pulled away to look at something, and quickly gotten him into a vehicle and out of town before anyone noticed. It was possible, theoretically. But it required Linda to be misremembering events in a very specific way, to believe she'd walked Noah all the way to school when she'd actually left him somewhere along the route. And it didn't explain why no one else had seen anything, why there were no witnesses to a kidnapping in broad daylight in a small town where people knew their neighbors and noticed strangers. Another theory that gained some traction, particularly among those who wanted to believe Linda was innocent, was that Noah had wandered away from school on his own. That perhaps Linda had walked him to the playground or the front door, and Noah had seemed fine, so she'd left him to go inside on his own. And then, instead of going to class, Noah had wandered off, attracted by something that caught his interest, a dog, a bird, a piece of interesting trash. He'd walked away from the school, gotten lost, maybe fallen into a creek or a ditch or some other place where his body hadn't been found despite extensive searches. But this theory had its own problems. Noah was a cautious child, not prone to wandering. He followed rules. And even if he had wandered off, where could he have gone that search dogs and hundreds of volunteers wouldn't have found him? The years passed with no answers. Noah's case remained open but inactive, one of those mysteries that haunts a community but gradually recedes from daily consciousness. New children were born, grew up never knowing Noah Turner, knowing only the story of the boy who disappeared, the cautionary tale parents told when teaching their children not to talk to strangers. Linda and Robert's marriage didn't survive. The stress, the grief, the unspoken accusations and doubts, all of it created a chasm between them that widened until it was unbridgeable. They divorced in 1987, 4 years after Noah's disappearance. Robert moved to Indianapolis, remarried eventually, tried to build a new life. Linda stayed in Greenfield, unable to leave the last place she'd seen her son, unable to abandon the hope that somehow, someday, he might come home. She became a recluse, rarely leaving her house, letting the yard go wild, the paint peel, the shutters hang crooked. The neighbors whispered about her, the crazy lady in the deteriorating house, the woman who maybe killed her son, probably killed her son, definitely knew more than she was saying. Detective Graves retired in 1992, but before he left the force, he gave one final interview about the Noah Turner case. He made it clear that, in his opinion, Linda Turner knew exactly what had happened to her son. He believed she had caused Noah's death, accidentally or otherwise, and hidden his body so well that it had never been found. He believed justice had been denied because the evidence, specifically, Noah's body, had never been recovered. Linda heard about the interview, heard Graves' accusations made public, made official in a way they'd never been before. She considered suing for defamation, but what was the point? The damage to her reputation was already complete. Everyone in Greenfield believed she was guilty. Proving she wasn't had become impossible without Noah himself reappearing to tell his story. The case went cold in every meaningful sense, though it was never officially closed. Occasionally, over the years, there were reported sightings of Noah, a boy who looked like he might be the right age seen in a shopping mall in Ohio, a teenager whose picture bore a slight resemblance spotted in Florida, a young man in Illinois who seemed to have no memory of his early childhood. Each lead was investigated, each turned out to be nothing. Not Noah. Never Noah. In 2003, 20 years after Noah's disappearance, a television show about cold cases featured the Turner case. They interviewed Linda, now 52 years old, looking much older, her face lined with grief and years of whispered accusations. She told her story again, the same story she'd been telling for 2 decades, her voice tired but consistent. I walked him to school. I saw him go into his classroom. I saw him sit down. I don't know what happened after that, but I did not hurt my son. I would never hurt my son. I loved him more than anything in the world. I still love him. I still hope, every single day, that he'll come home. The show also interviewed Robert, now remarried with 2 daughters from his second marriage. He was more circumspect, more willing to acknowledge ambiguities and uncertainties. I don't know what happened that day, he said. I wasn't there. I want to believe Linda. I want to believe my son was taken by someone and is out there somewhere, alive. But 20 years have passed and there's been nothing. No evidence he was abducted. No evidence of anything. I've had to make peace with the fact that I'll probably never know the truth. The show generated renewed interest in the case, tips flooding in from viewers who thought they'd seen Noah or knew something relevant. Police investigated each tip, finding nothing. The case settled back into cold silence. Linda Turner died in 2015 at the age of 64. The official cause of death was heart failure, but those who knew her said she'd really died of a broken heart, of 32 years of grief and accusation and unanswered questions. In her will, she left everything to a foundation she'd established years earlier dedicated to finding missing children, a final effort to do some good, to help other families avoid the hell she'd lived through. Her death occasioned another round of news coverage, another wave of articles asking what had really happened to Noah Turner. The questions remained the same. The answers remained elusive. Robert attended the funeral, standing at the back of the church, watching as his ex-wife was laid to rest. Afterward, he spoke briefly to a reporter. If Linda did something to Noah, she took that secret to her grave. But I've spent 32 years thinking about this, going over every detail I know, every conversation we had, every moment of that day, and I can't make myself believe she hurt him. I think something else happened, something none of us understand, and we've been looking in the wrong places all this time. Today, more than 40 years after Noah Turner disappeared, the case remains officially unsolved. The Greenfield Police Department maintains a file, though the detectives who originally worked it are long retired or deceased. Occasionally, someone new to the force will pull the file, read through the reports, look at the faded photographs of a 5-year-old boy with sandy blonde hair and bright blue eyes, and wonder if there's some angle that was missed, some question that wasn't asked, some answer that's been hiding in plain sight all along. The house on Maple Street where the Turners lived has had 3 different families since Linda's death. The current owners know the history, everyone in Greenfield knows the history, but they chose to buy it anyway, got a good price because of the stigma, and they've made peace with living in a house where tragedy once resided. The school where Noah was supposed to attend kindergarten has been renovated twice, the old classrooms reconfigured, Room 7 where Mrs. Patterson taught no longer exists in the same form. Mrs. Patterson herself passed away in 2008, and she maintained until her death that Noah Turner had not been in her classroom that Tuesday morning, that she'd marked him absent, that she would have remembered if he'd been there. The theories continue to evolve and multiply. Internet sleuths have taken up the case, posting on forums and social media, analyzing every detail, proposing new explanations. Some believe Linda was telling the truth and Noah was abducted. Some believe Linda killed Noah accidentally. Some believe Linda killed Noah deliberately. Some believe Robert was involved. Some believe there was a third party, a mysterious stranger who was never identified. Some believe Noah is still alive somewhere, living under a different name, with no memory of his early childhood. The truth, if there is a singular truth, remains buried in the past, in those hours on a September morning when a 5-year-old boy was seen walking to school with his mother and then simply ceased to exist in any verifiable way. What happened in those hours? Where did Noah Turner go? How does a child vanish so completely, so absolutely, leaving no trace, no evidence, no body, no answers? These are the questions that haunt this case. These are the questions that turned a quiet Tuesday morning in 1983 into a mystery that has consumed the lives of everyone it touched and continues to fascinate, horrify, and perplex all these decades later. If this case affected you the way it affected me, I need you to do something. Share this video. Share Noah's story. Someone out there might know something, might remember something, might have a piece of information that finally brings answers to this decades-old mystery. Hit the like button, subscribe to the Cold Case Desk, and turn on notifications so you never miss our investigations into cases that demand justice, cases that refuse to be forgotten. Drop a comment below with your theories, your thoughts, anything that might help us understand what really happened to Noah Turner. Because the only way these cold cases ever get solved is if we keep talking about them, keep investigating, keep refusing to let them fade into obscurity. This is the Cold Case Desk, and we never close the file. Justice may be delayed, but it's never too late. Thank you for watching, and remember, somewhere, someone knows what happened to Noah Turner. Maybe it's you.